Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The silence in this old house was starting to feel less like peace and more like a weight. Ever since Richard passed, every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind outside the windows seemed to echo the emptiness he'd left behind. We bought this place, our little slice of countryside heaven, dreaming of renovations and grandkids on the porch swing. Now it was just me, the peeling wallpaper, and a list of repairs long enough to rival the phone book. The gutters were sagging, the porch steps felt spongy underfoot, and the garden, well, the garden looked like nature was actively trying to reclaim the land. I felt overwhelmed, adrift in a sea of overwhelming to-dos that I had neither the energy nor, frankly, the know-how to tackle. My own son, bless his heart, lived 3 states away with a young family and a demanding job. He worried, called constantly, but couldn't just drop everything. My friends offered sympathy, casseroles, and well-meaning advice, but hands-on help, that was a taller order. Then came the phone call I hadn't expected. It was my cousin, Mark, my Uncle Ray's boy. We hadn't been close, not really. Mark was a few years younger, always seemed a bit restless. He'd moved around a lot, worked different jobs, construction, landscaping, even a stint on a fishing boat up in Alaska, or so I'd heard through the family grapevine. We saw each other at the obligatory weddings and funerals, exchanged polite hellos and how are yous, but that was about it. He lived about an hour away, in the city, a world away from my quiet, dusty corner. "Sarah? It's Mark." His voice came over the line, a little hesitant, deeper than I remembered. "Mom told me about Richard. I'm really sorry. And she mentioned you were trying to manage the house on your own." I mumbled something about being fine, just busy, the usual deflections, pride, I suppose, and not wanting to burden anyone. "Look," he continued, cutting gently through my polite dismissal. "I've got some downtime between jobs right now. Seriously, like a month with nothing lined up. I was thinking maybe I could come out for a bit, lend a hand. I know my way around a toolbox. And Dad always said I got his green thumb, for what it's worth." I was taken aback. Mark offering to help? It felt strange, unexpected. Part of me, the tired, overwhelmed part, wanted to weep with relief. Another part, the wary, self-reliant part, felt suspicious. Why? What did he want? Was he expecting payment? Or maybe he was just bored. "Mark, that's incredibly kind of you," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "But it's a lot. The place is a mess." "Doesn't matter," he replied easily. "Fresh air, honest work. Sounds good to me. Besides," his voice softened slightly, "Uncle Ray always thought the world of Richard. And you, helping out feels like the right thing to do. No strings, Sarah. Just let me know if it's okay." I hesitated for only a moment longer. The image of the sagging gutters, the overgrown garden, the sheer volume of work flashed before my eyes. What did I have to lose? "Okay, Mark," I finally breathed out. That would be wonderful. Thank you." He arrived 3 days later, driving a sturdy-looking pickup truck that seemed as well-traveled as he was. He wasn't the lanky, slightly awkward kid I remembered from Aunt Carol's disastrous anniversary party 10 years ago. Time had filled him out, etched lines around his eyes that spoke of outdoor work and maybe some hard living. But his smile was open, genuine, as he stepped out of the truck, pulling a pair of worn work gloves from his back pocket. He looked around, taking in the house, the yard, his gaze lingering on the porch swing, hanging slightly askew. "Right," he said, clapping his hands together lightly. "Where do we start?" The first few days were a study in careful politeness. We were navigating unfamiliar territory. Two relatives who were practically strangers, thrown together by circumstance and his unexpected offer. I'd make coffee in the morning, strong, the way Richard used to like it. Mark was always up before me, already outside inspecting a leaky faucet on the garden hose or testing the stability of the porch railing. He worked with a quiet efficiency that was strangely calming. There was no wasted movement, no complaining. He'd tackle a task, see it through, and then move on to the next. We started with the gutters. It involved ladders, heights, and slimy handfuls of decaying leaves. I stood below, handing him tools, managing the hose to flush out the downspouts, feeling slightly useless but grateful. He didn't make me feel incompetent, though. He'd explain what he was doing, patiently answering my questions about fascia boards and sealant. We talked, but mostly about the task at hand. Small talk felt forced, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit. "Hand me that trowel, would you?" he asked one afternoon, perched precariously near the roofline. I passed it up, watching the sure way he moved. "You seem to know what you're doing," I commented. He glanced down, a wry smile touching his lips. "Picked up a few things here and there. You work enough odd jobs. You learn to be handy." He paused, scraping another clump of gunk free. "Or you learn to call someone who is." We fell back into silence. The only sounds the scrape of the trowel, the rustle of leaves hitting the tarp below, the distant buzz of cicadas starting their afternoon chorus. The air hung heavy with unspoken things, shared blood, divergent paths, the ghosts of the family members who connected us. Uncle Ray, his dad, had been Richard's favorite fishing buddy. My mom and his had been close as sisters growing up. Yet here we were, linked by these threads, but knowing so little about the fabric of each other's lives. The evenings were the quietest. After cleaning up, we'd eat simple dinners I'd prepare. I felt obligated to offer, and he seemed grateful for a home-cooked meal. Conversation often circled back to family, tentative explorations of shared memories. "Remembered that disastrous picnic at Miller's Pond?" he asked one night, a genuine laugh in his voice. "When Uncle Ray's canoe tipped over with the potato salad?" I did remember. I remembered Uncle Ray sputtering, covered in mayonnaise and weeds, and Richard laughing so hard he almost fell in two. A small fissure opened in the wall between us, a shared glimpse of a happier past. "Richard loved your dad," I said softly, testing the waters. Mark nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. "Yeah, Dad felt the same. He was hit hard when Richard passed." He looked back at me. "We all were, Sarah." His directness surprised me. It wasn't pity, it felt like acknowledgement. Simple, unadorned truth. He saw the sadness I was trying so hard to keep tucked away behind the repairs and the forced cheerfulness. As the first week drew to a close, the gutters were clear, the porch steps were reinforced, and the mountain of work seemed slightly less insurmountable. But more than that, the silence in the house was changing again. It was still quiet, but it was no longer the heavy, lonely quiet of before. It was the quiet of two people working side by side, a quiet punctuated by the rhythmic sounds of labor, shared cups of coffee, and the slow, careful weaving of new threads between us. The unexpectedness of his presence was slowly giving way to a tentative comfort, a budding familiarity that felt both fragile and surprisingly strong. I still didn't entirely understand why he was there, but I was starting to be profoundly grateful that he was. The second week flowed more easily than the first. The initial awkwardness had softened, replaced by the comfortable rhythm of shared work. We moved from the exterior repairs to the garden, which was my personal Everest of neglect. Richard had loved this garden, coaxing roses and tomatoes from the stubborn clay soil. Since his illness, and then his passing, it had become a tangled mess, a constant, thorny reminder of my failure to keep his passion alive. Mark, however, waded into it with the same quiet determination he'd applied to the gutters. He seemed to know instinctively what needed pruning, what needed pulling, what needed saving. These rose bushes just need some tough love, he announced one morning, brandishing a pair of heavy-duty loppers. And space to breathe. He showed me how to make the cuts, explaining the difference between old wood and new growth. My hands, usually busy with indoor tasks or paperwork, felt clumsy at first, fumbling with the tools, but Mark was patient. Like this, he demonstrated, guiding my hand, angle the cut away from the bud. See, there was something grounding about the physical labor, the feel of the earth under my fingernails, the satisfying rip of stubborn weeds coming free. We worked for hours under the warm sun, often in silence, but it was a companionable silence now. Sometimes snippets of his life would emerge, offered casually between pulling bindweed or turning compost. He told me about the vast, empty landscapes of Alaska, the camaraderie, and the danger of working on the boats. He spoke of the transient nature of construction work, the satisfaction of building something solid, even if you knew you'd soon move on. He didn't boast or complain. He just stated facts, painting pictures with simple words. I found myself listening intently, piecing together the mosaic of his life, so different from my own settled existence. He asked about Richard, too, not invasive questions, but gentle inquiries about his interests, his work, the things that had made him happy. Talking about Richard with Mark felt different than with my friends. Mark hadn't known him intimately in recent years, so there were no preconceived notions, no pitying glances. It was just talking, remembering. It unearthed memories both happy and sad, but sharing them seemed to lessen their solitary weight. One sweltering afternoon, we took a break, retreating to the shade of the old oak tree at the edge of the yard with tall glasses of iced tea. We sat on the cool grass, watching the heat shimmer above the newly cleared flower beds. You know, Mark said, swirling the ice in his glass, Dad used to talk about this place. When you and Richard first bought it, he said Richard was like a kid with a new toy, planning all the things he wanted to do. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. He had sketches, blueprints, even tucked away in his desk drawer. For a new workshop, a bigger deck, he had so many plans. My voice caught slightly on the last words. Mark didn't rush to fill the silence. He just sat there, looking out at the yard. After a moment, he said quietly, "It's good soil here. Takes work, but it's good." It wasn't a platitude. It felt like an observation rooted in his own experience, a recognition of potential, of the value in tending to things. It was later that week, while clearing out the dilapidated shed at the back of the property, that something shifted more profoundly. The shed was crammed with forgotten things, old tools, broken lawn furniture, stacks of clay pots, and tucked away in a damp corner, a dusty wooden crate. "What's this?" Mark asked, dragging it out into the light. It was heavy. Together, we pried off the lid. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed packing straw, were dozens of Richard's old woodworking projects. Small, intricately carved animals, a beautiful inlaid box, a half-finished model ship, its tiny sails carefully furled. I hadn't known he kept them, hadn't even known where they were. Seeing them, tangible pieces of his passion and skill, brought a fresh wave of grief, sharp and sudden. I sank down onto an overturned bucket, tears welling up despite my best efforts. I expected Mark to offer awkward condolences or perhaps retreat and give me space. Instead, he knelt beside the crate, picking up a small wooden bird, turning it over and over in his calloused hands. "He was really good," Mark said softly, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Look at the detail on this." He ran a finger gently over the carved feathers. He didn't look at me, just at the bird, allowing me my tears without making me feel exposed. He started carefully unpacking the other pieces, laying them out on a dusty workbench, handling each one with a surprising reverence. "I remember him showing me how to whittle once," Mark continued, his voice low and reflective. "Down by the creek behind Grandpa's house. I must have been maybe 10. I made this lopsided-looking squirrel." He chuckled softly. He told me it had character. He started talking about his own father then, about Uncle Ray's workshop, the smell of sawdust and oil, the patience his father had sometimes shown, the impatience at other times. He spoke of regrets, of things left unsaid before Uncle Ray passed away a few years ago. It wasn't a confession, more like thinking aloud, connecting his own memories of his father to the legacy Richard had left behind in this dusty crate. Listening to him, sharing that quiet space filled with the ghosts of the men who had connected our families, I felt a profound sense of understanding pass between us. It wasn't just about fixing a house anymore. It was about excavating memories, acknowledging loss, and finding an unexpected solace in shared vulnerability. He wasn't just my uncle's son, the restless wanderer. He was a man who understood grief, who knew the weight of family history, who could offer comfort not through words, but through quiet presence and shared work. The help he had offered extended far beyond hammers and nails. It was reaching into the broken places inside me, offering a steady hand I hadn't realized I so desperately needed. The surprise wasn't just that he'd offered to help. It was the depth of the help he was actually providing, purely by being there, being himself. The discovery in the shed seemed to open a new channel between us. Conversations flowed more freely, touching on deeper subjects. While we tackled the more overgrown corners of the backyard, clearing thorny bushes and uncovering forgotten flagstones, we talked about choices made, paths taken and not taken. Mark spoke about the lure of the open road, the freedom, but also the loneliness that sometimes crept in. He admitted that seeing the life Richard and I had built here, the roots we'd put down, made him think, not with envy exactly, but with a kind of quiet contemplation. I, in turn, found myself sharing things I hadn't voiced to many people: the anxieties about the future, the feeling of being untethered after Richard's death, the struggle to redefine myself outside of being part of a couple. Mark listened without judgment, occasionally offering a perspective shaped by his own unconventional life. He didn't offer solutions, just understanding. "Sometimes," he said one afternoon, leaning on his shovel handle and wiping sweat from his brow, "the plans we make don't mean much. Life throws curveballs. You just gotta learn to adjust your swing." It was simple, almost cliché, but coming from him, someone who seemed to have navigated more than his share of curveballs, it resonated. One evening, after a particularly long day wrestling with a stubborn old stump, neither of us felt like cooking. "There's a decent pizza place in town," I suggested. "My treat." "Sounds good," Mark agreed. We drove into the small town nearby, the first time we'd really left the property together other than for supplies. Sitting in the brightly lit pizzeria, surrounded by the chatter of other diners, felt strangely normal, yet significant. It was a break from the insular world we'd created back at the house. Over pizza and beers, the conversation drifted to family dynamics, the unspoken tensions and loyalties that exist in any clan. Mark shared a story about a falling out between his dad and another uncle, something I'd only heard whispers about. He told it without bitterness, just a sadness for the years of lost connection. Family, he sighed, taking a sip of his beer. Can't live with them, can't, well, but they're yours, flaws and all. Richard always said that blood is thicker than water, but sometimes water is easier to swallow. I replied, remembering one of Richard's wry observations. Mark laughed, a real, hearty laugh this time. He wasn't wrong. As we talked, I realized how much my perception of Mark had changed. The distant, slightly aimless cousin had been replaced by a thoughtful, perceptive man with a quiet strength and a surprising depth of feeling. He carried his own burdens, his own history, but he didn't let them define him negatively. Instead, they seemed to have forged a resilience and empathy that I found myself increasingly relying on. The emotional climax of his visit didn't come with a grand gesture or a dramatic revelation. It arrived quietly, unexpectedly, one rainy afternoon. We were indoors, forced to abandon outside work. I'd been sorting through a box of old photographs, trying to decide what to keep, what to discard, another overwhelming task I'd been avoiding. Mark was sanding down one of Richard's half-finished carvings from the shed. The rhythmic scrape of the sandpaper, a soothing sound against the drumming rain. I pulled out a photo of Richard and me, taken probably 20 years ago, on a beach vacation. We looked young, carefree, blissfully unaware of the challenges life would eventually throw our way. A wave of longing washed over me, so intense it stole my breath. I put the photo down quickly, blinking back tears. Mark stopped sanding. He didn't say anything, just looked over at me, his expression full of quiet understanding. He put the carving down carefully, wiped his dusty hands on his jeans, and walked over to the box of photos. He didn't hover or pry. He just picked up a different photo, one of a large family gathering, decades old. Uncle Ray was there, grinning, arm thrown around Richard's shoulders. My parents stood nearby. Mark and I were just kids in the background, looking bored. "Look at us," he said softly, a faint smile on his face. "You were already bossing someone around, probably me." I managed a watery chuckle. I probably was. He pointed to Uncle Ray and Richard. "They look happy there." "They were?" I whispered. We stood there for a few minutes, just looking at the picture, a silent acknowledgement of the shared history captured in that faded image, the intertwining roots of our families, the love and the losses that bound us together. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of old paper and rain, a profound sense of connection settled between us. It wasn't romantic. It was deeper than that, more fundamental. It was the connection of family, rediscovered and reaffirmed. It was the comfort of knowing that even in grief, even in uncertainty, you weren't entirely alone. Someone else understood the landscape of your past, recognized the faces in the photographs, shared the weight of the memories. Mark's presence, his quiet empathy, his willingness to simply be there, had become an unexpected anchor in the storm of my grief. The help he offered wasn't just fixing my house. He was helping me piece back together parts of myself I thought were lost for good. And the respect I felt for him, for the man he was immense. The final week of Mark's stay arrived too quickly. The bulk of the heavy work was done. The gutters were secure, the porch was safe, the garden was tamed and showing hopeful signs of new life under the mulch we'd spread. The shed was organized, Richard's carvings carefully wrapped and stored. We spent the last few days on smaller tasks, fixing a sticky window, touching up paint, clearing out the last of the debris from the yard. The rhythm of our work felt different, tinged with the knowledge of his impending departure. There was an ease between us now that hadn't existed before. We could work in comfortable silence or chat easily about anything or nothing. We developed our own small routines. Coffee on the porch in the mornings, lemonade breaks under the oak tree, evening meals where conversation flowed naturally. I found myself dreading the return of the heavy silence that I knew would follow his leaving. On his last evening, I made a proper dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the works. It felt important to mark the occasion, to express my gratitude in a way that went beyond simple thanks. We ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. "You've worked miracles here, Mark," I said, meaning it. "I don't know how to thank you." He shrugged, looking out at the yard. It needed doing. And it was good for me too, Sarah. Being here, working with my hands on something solid. He paused, reminded me of Dad. In a way, good memories. "I'm glad," I said softly. "Richard would have been glad too. He would have liked you." Mark met my gaze, a warmth in his eyes I hadn't seen when he first arrived. I think I would have liked him too. I mean, I did, from what I knew, but I get a better sense of him now, from being here, from you. After dinner, we sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the crickets start their nightly song. The air felt peaceful, settled. The house behind us no longer felt like a burden, but like a home again, albeit a different kind of home now. Mark said, eventually breaking the quiet, "If you ever need anything else, anything at all, don't hesitate to call." I mean it. I will. I promised, and I knew I would. This wasn't just a polite offer anymore. It was a connection forged through shared effort and unexpected understanding. The next morning, he loaded his tools back into his truck. There was a brief, slightly awkward moment as he prepared to leave. How do you say goodbye after an experience like this? He turned from the truck door, stepping towards me. I thought he might offer a handshake, but instead, he gave me a brief, firm hug. It felt solid, reassuring, brotherly, almost. "Take care of yourself, Sarah," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You too, Mark. Drive safe." I watched as his truck rumbled down the driveway and turned onto the road, disappearing from view. The silence descended again, but it wasn't the same oppressive quiet from before. The house felt different. I felt different, standing there on the sturdy porch steps, looking out at the neat garden and the clear gutters. I felt a sense of accomplishment, but more than that, a sense of renewal. Mark's unexpected offer to help had led to something far more significant than home repairs. It had been a journey of rediscovery, of family ties I hadn't realized were so strong, of my own resilience, and of the quiet strength found in unexpected connections. He had arrived as my uncle's son, a near stranger, and left as a friend, a confidant, someone who had seen me through a difficult passage with quiet respect and unwavering support. The experience hadn't magically erased my grief or solved all my problems, but it had shown me that I wasn't alone, that connections can deepen in surprising ways, and that sometimes the best kind of help comes from the most unexpected places, offered freely, with no strings attached, changing everything. I walked back inside, the house feeling less empty, my steps lighter than they had been in a long, long time. I had a lot to think about, a lot to process, but for the first time since Richard was gone, I felt a flicker of hope for the future, a quiet confidence that I could, indeed, adjust my swing.